Look at this plant. 7 weeks of picking, and it is still setting new fruit like it is the first week of June. The vines are thick as your thumb. The leaves are deep green, not a spot of mildew anywhere. And I have not bought a single garden center fertilizer, not one fancy bloom booster, nothing with a cartoon cucumber on the label. One bottle. Once a month. That is the whole system. And the thing that gets me every time, the reason I am almost irritated when I think about it, is that I wasted years trying to solve this problem with solutions that cost 20 times as much and delivered half the result. The bottle I use costs less than a single coffee from a vending machine. You probably have the ingredients in your kitchen right now, and I am going to show you exactly what it is, exactly how to mix it, and exactly why it makes a cucumber plant behave like it has forgotten how to stop producing. The reason you have likely never heard of this is honestly kind of annoying. It works too well and costs too little for anyone to sell it to you. There is no patent on it, no subscription, no proprietary blend with a mysterious name printed in gold foil. It is just a simple, almost laughably cheap combination of two things that, when brought together in the right ratio once a month, trigger a cascade of biological responses in the plant that essentially trick it into continuous production. And here is the part that really gets me. This is not new. This is not some internet hack invented in 2023. Farmers in parts of Eastern Europe and Asia have been using a version of this for generations. My own grandmother, who never set foot in a garden center her entire life, used something so close to this that, when I finally connected the dots, I just stood in my garden shaking my head. I had been handed the answer decades ago, and I was too busy reading the back of a plastic bottle to see it. I know exactly what you might be thinking right now. Probably just another miracle internet trick that does not actually work at all. I completely understand your approach. I thought exactly the same thing until I saw with my own eyes what this thing can do. I have been gardening for a good 15 years now, and for the first 10 of those years, I chased every cucumber growing secret I could find. I tried the specialized fertilizers with the perfect NPK ratios. I tried the compost teas, the fish emulsions, the Epsom salt sprays. I tried burying matchsticks for sulfur. I tried talking to them, for goodness sake. And every single year, right around mid-July, the same thing happened. The plants would look magnificent for a few weeks. I would get a flush of cucumbers that made me feel like a genius, and then the leaves would start to pale. The edges would yellow. The new fruit would come in pale and withered, or they would just stop setting altogether. Powdery mildew would move in like an uninvited relative. And by August, I was ripping out dead vines and telling myself that cucumbers just have a short season. That is just the way it is. Nothing you can do about it. Do you know that feeling? That resignation that settles in around late July when you look at your cucumber trellis and see more yellow than green. I know it all too well. And I accepted it for years because every commercial product I tried promised to fix it, and none of them did. The problem was never that my soil was bad or that I needed a more expensive fertilizer. The problem was that I was feeding the plant the wrong thing at the wrong time, and I was ignoring the one nutrient cycle that actually governs how long a cucumber plant keeps producing. Once you understand that cycle, and once you feed it with this one bottle once a month, the whole game changes. Let me walk you through the usual fixes first, because you have probably tried at least 2 of them, and I want you to understand why they failed before I show you what actually works. The first one is the classic high nitrogen fertilizer push. You know the one. The blue powder you dissolve in water, or the granules you scratch into the soil. High first number on the bag. And it works for about 10 days. You get this explosive burst of dark green leafy growth, and you think you have cracked the code. But here is what actually happens. Cucumbers are what we call heavy feeders, yes, but they are also sensitive to nitrogen in a way that tomatoes are not. When you flood a cucumber plant with nitrogen, especially in the middle of the season, you push it into vegetative overdrive. It puts all its energy into leaves and stems. It forgets about fruit. The flowers drop off. The few cucumbers that do set are often bitter because the plant is stressed in a way you cannot see from the outside. And the excess nitrogen salts build up in the soil, which messes with the root system's ability to take up other minerals. You are basically force-feeding the plant a steak dinner every day and wondering why it does not want to go for a run. The second common fix is the calcium and magnesium root. CalMag sprays, Epsom salt drenches, crushed eggshells worked into the soil. And look, calcium is genuinely important for cucumbers, especially for preventing blossom end rot, which does occasionally show up in cucumbers, though it is more famous in tomatoes. Magnesium is the central atom in chlorophyll, so without it, leaves cannot stay green. But here is the trap. Most people apply these as a reaction. They see a yellow leaf or a soft fruit tip, and they reach for the CalMag. The problem is that by the time you see the symptom, the underlying issue is usually not a simple deficiency. It is a lockup. The calcium and magnesium are already in your soil, but the plant cannot access them because the soil chemistry is out of balance, or because the root system has been damaged by inconsistent watering, or because the plant has shifted its energy allocation in response to stress. Dumping more calcium on top of a lockup is like adding more cars to a traffic jam. It does not move. It just sits there. The third fix, and this one honestly breaks my heart a little because I see it recommended so often, is vinegar or some other homemade acidifier. The theory is that cucumbers like slightly acidic soil, so you lower the pH with vinegar and unlock nutrients. In practice, what usually happens is you burn the fine root hairs, you kill beneficial soil microbes, and you create pH swings that stress the plant even more. It is like curing a headache by cutting off your head. Technically it works, but is it a reasonable solution? No, it is not. And then there is the fourth approach, which is the one I took for years. Just give up. Accept that cucumbers are a short-season crop. Pull them in August and plant something else. And that is the saddest fix of all, because it is completely unnecessary. The plant wants to keep producing. It is genetically programmed to keep producing until frost kills it. The reason it stops is that we starve it of the one thing it needs most during the fruiting phase, and we do it because nobody ever told us what that thing is. So let me tell you about Mrs. Kowalska. She was my neighbor for 12 years, and she had a garden that made mine look like a sad little experiment in disappointment. Her cucumber trellis was legendary. It was not fancy, just some old wooden stakes and twine. But every single year, from June until the first hard frost in October, she was out there picking cucumbers. Big ones, small ones, pickling ones, slicing ones. She never bought fertilizer. She never sprayed anything. She never seemed to do anything at all except water and pick. And for 12 years, I watched this and I assumed it was just her soil. Maybe she had some perfect loam that had been amended for decades. Maybe she was just lucky. Then 2 summers ago, she finally decided to reveal her secret. She was moving to a smaller place, and I think she felt a little sorry for me. She walked over one evening with a plastic soda bottle filled with a cloudy white liquid. It looked like watered-down milk. She handed it to me and said, in her very matter-of-fact way, once a month, a cup of this around the base of each plant, no more, no less. Do not pour it on the leaves, just the soil. And then she walked back home. That was it. No explanation. No recipe. Just a bottle of mystery liquid and a set of instructions. I stood there holding this bottle, and I will be honest with you, I almost poured it down the drain. I was skeptical. I had tried so many things. I had read so many forum posts and watched so many videos. What could possibly be in a plastic soda bottle that would make any difference? But I had nothing to lose. My cucumber plants were already starting to yellow. It was late July. The season was effectively over anyway. So I followed her instructions. 1 cup around the base of each plant. And I waited. Within 5 days, I noticed something. The yellowing on the older leaves had stopped spreading. It had not reversed, not yet, but it had stopped. The growing tips, which had been pale and kind of pinched looking, were unfurling in a darker shade of green. A week later, new flowers started appearing. Not the sad, half-hearted male flower that sometimes show up late in the season. Both male and female flowers, in abundance. By mid-August, those plants were setting fruit again. By September, I was picking more cucumbers than I had in June. I harvested until the 3rd week of October, when a hard freeze finally took them out. And the entire time, I kept thinking about that plastic bottle. What was in it? Why did it work? And why had I never heard of this before? I spent that winter researching. I called Mrs. Kowalska's daughter, who gave me the recipe. I cross-referenced it with old agricultural bulletins. I read papers on plant physiology and soil microbiology. And what I found was that this simple mixture, this 1 bottle a month, is not magic. It is a precise intervention in the plant's potassium and phosphorus cycle, delivered in a form that soil microbes can process almost instantly, and timed exactly to the moment when the plant is making a decision about whether to keep fruiting or start shutting down. So here it is. The reveal. The 1 bottle. Are you ready? It is milk. Plain whole milk, preferably raw if you can get it, but pasteurized whole milk from the grocery store works just fine. And mixed into that milk is a single tablespoon of plain wood ash. Not charcoal briquette ash, not ash from treated lumber or painted wood or anything with glue in it. Just clean, white, powdery ash from hardwood burned in a fire pit or a wood stove. That is it. Milk and wood ash. Shaken together in a bottle. Applied once a month. That is the whole secret. I know exactly how that sounds. Milk and ash. It sounds like something a medieval farmer would try because he had nothing else. It sounds too simple, too cheap, too weird to actually work. I completely understand your skepticism. I felt it too, standing in my garden holding that soda bottle. But let me walk you through why this works, and by the time I am done, I think you will see that this is not weird at all. It is actually one of the most elegant, scientifically sound plant feeding strategies I have ever encountered. Let us start with the ingredients. First, the milk. Whole milk contains 3 things that are incredibly valuable to a fruiting plant. The first is calcium, which you probably expected. Calcium strengthens cell walls, which makes the plant more resistant to fungal diseases like powdery mildew. It also prevents blossom end rot in the fruit. But the calcium in milk is not just any calcium. It is calcium in a biological matrix, surrounded by proteins and fats and sugars that soil microbes recognize as food. When you pour milk onto the soil, you are not just adding a mineral. You are feeding an entire microbial ecosystem. Those microbes break down the milk components, and, in the process, they convert the calcium into a form that plant roots can absorb almost immediately. It is the difference between handing someone a raw carrot and handing them a smoothie. Same nutrients, vastly different speed of absorption. The second thing in milk is a suite of B vitamins, particularly riboflavin and B12, which are not typically found in soil, but which plants can absorb through their roots and use as cofactors in energy metabolism. This is a subtle effect, not a dramatic growth spurt, but it contributes to the overall vigor of the plant. The third thing, and this is the one that genuinely surprised me when I read the research, is the milk fat itself. Soil fungi, particularly the beneficial mycorrhizal fungi that form symbiotic relationships with plant roots, thrive on certain fatty acids. The butterfat in whole milk is like a high-energy snack for these fungi. When you feed the mycorrhizal network, you increase the effective surface area of the plant's root system by orders of magnitude. The plant can suddenly access water and nutrients from a much larger volume of soil. It is like giving the roots a 100-mile extension cord. Now the wood ash. Wood ash is approximately 25% calcium carbonate, which further supports the calcium supply, but its real contribution is potassium. Potassium is the single most important nutrient for fruit set and fruit quality. It regulates the opening and closing of stomata, the tiny pores on leaves that control gas exchange and water loss. It activates enzymes that synthesize proteins and starches. It transports sugars from the leaves into the developing fruit. When a cucumber plant runs low on potassium, the fruit comes in small, pale, and often misshapen. The plant starts pulling potassium from the older leaves to feed the growing tips, which is why those older leaves turn yellow and die. The plant is cannibalizing itself to keep the fruit alive, and eventually it just gives up. Wood ash also contains phosphorus, which is essential for flower formation and root development, and a whole range of trace minerals like magnesium, iron, manganese, and zinc. These are present in small amounts, but they are in a form that is highly available to plants because the burning process has already broken down the complex organic molecules. The ash is essentially a fast-release mineral supplement. But here is the key. You cannot just dump wood ash on your soil and expect miracles. Wood ash is alkaline. It has a pH of around 10 to 12. If you apply it directly, especially in large amounts, you can spike the soil pH and cause exactly the kind of nutrient lockup I described earlier. This is why so many people try wood ash once, see their plants suffer, and swear off it forever. The missing step is the milk. When you mix wood ash into milk and let it sit for a few hours, something interesting happens. The lactic acid in the milk reacts with the alkaline ash, neutralizing the pH. The mixture you end up with is close to neutral, somewhere around 6.5 to 7, which is perfect for cucumbers. The acid also helps solubilize some of the minerals in the ash, making them even more available. The milk proteins coat the ash particles and slow down their release in the soil, so you get a steady supply of potassium over several weeks instead of a sudden spike. This is the beautiful, elegant mechanism that misses. Kowalska probably never articulated, but understood intuitively through decades of practice. The milk and the ash are not just two separate ingredients. They are a system. Each one moderates the other. Each one enhances the other. Together, they deliver calcium, potassium, phosphorus, trace minerals, vitamins, and a microbial feast, all in a single monthly application, all at a pH that the soil can handle, all for the cost of a splash of milk and a handful of ash. So let me give you the exact recipe. This is the part where you should pay close attention because the ratios matter. You will need a 1-liter plastic bottle. An old soda bottle or water bottle is perfect. Fill it about 3/4 full with whole milk. Do not use skim milk or 2%. The fat content matters for the microbial feeding effect. If you can get raw milk from a local farm, that is ideal because it still contains live beneficial bacteria and enzymes. But if all you have access to is pasteurized whole milk from the grocery store, that is fine. It still works. I have tested both. Next, you need 1 tablespoon of clean wood ash. I want to be very specific about this because I have seen people make mistakes here. The ash must come from untreated, unpainted, unvarnished hardwood. Oak, maple, hickory, ash, beech, any of these are fine. Softwoods like pine are okay in a pinch, but they contain more resins and less potassium. Never use ash from a charcoal grill if you used lighter fluid. Never use ash from a fireplace if you burned wrapping paper with colored ink or glossy magazines. Never use ash from pressure-treated lumber or plywood. Those contain chemicals you do not want anywhere near your food plants. If you do not have a wood stove or a fire pit, you can buy pure hardwood ash online. It is sold as a soil amendment, and it costs almost nothing. A 5-pound bag will last you several seasons. Add the tablespoon of ash to the milk in the bottle. Put the cap on tightly. Shake it vigorously for a full minute. You want the ash completely dispersed, no clumps. Then set the bottle aside for at least 2 hours, or ideally overnight. You will notice that the mixture separates a little as it sits. The ash settles to the bottom. That is normal. Just shake it again before you use it. Now, how to apply it. This is critical. You do not pour this on the leaves. Milk on leaves, especially in hot sun, can cause fungal issues, and it leaves a residue that looks terrible. This is a soil drench only. Water your cucumber plants normally first. You never want to apply any fertilizer to dry soil because it can shock the roots. Once the soil is moist, pour 1 cup of the mixture slowly around the base of each plant. Try to cover the entire root zone, which for a mature cucumber plant extends about 12 to 18 inches out from the main stem in all directions. Do not pour it right against the stem. That can cause stem rot. Keep it a few inches away. After you apply the mixture, water it in lightly, just enough to help it soak into the root zone. Do not flood it. You do not want to wash it past the roots. Then you are done. That is it. 1 cup per plant, once a month, from the time the first flowers appear until the end of the season. For me, in my climate, that means June, July, August, and September. 4 applications total. 4 cups of milk and 4 tablespoons of ash per plant for the entire season. I did the math. At current grocery prices, a gallon of whole milk costs about $3.50. A gallon contains 16 cups, so 1 cup costs roughly 22 cents. The ash is effectively free if you have a fire pit, or maybe a few cents per tablespoon if you buy it. The total cost per plant per season is under $1. Compare that to a bottle of liquid fertilizer concentrate that costs $12 to $20 and runs out after a month. Compare that to the cost of buying cucumbers at the store all summer because your plants gave up in July. It is almost absurd how cheap this is. Now I want to address a few common questions and mistakes because I have shared this method with friends, and some of them came back to me with problems that were entirely preventable. The first mistake is using too much. More is not better. If you apply this mixture more than once a month, or if you use more than 1 cup per plant, you risk overloading the soil with potassium, which can interfere with nitrogen uptake. You will know you have overdone it if the older leaves start developing brown scorched edges. That is potassium toxicity. It is rare with this diluted mixture, but it can happen if you get overeager. Stick to the schedule. Once a month. 1 cup. No more. The second mistake is using the wrong kind of ash. I already covered this, but I want to emphasize it because it is the most common error. Ash from a charcoal grill is not the same as ash from hardwood. Charcoal briquettes often contain coal dust, borax, and petroleum binders. That ash is toxic to plants. Do not use it. If you are not sure about your ash source, do not guess. Buy a bag of pure hardwood ash. It is not expensive, and it removes all doubt. The third mistake is applying the mixture to dry soil. I mentioned this earlier, but it bears repeating. When roots are dry, they are stressed. Their cell membranes are more permeable. If you hit them with a concentrated nutrient solution in that state, you can cause root burn. Always water first. Always. The fourth mistake is storing the mixture for too long. Milk and ash, once combined, will start to ferment after a few days, especially in warm weather. The fermentation is not necessarily harmful to plants, but the smell becomes quite unpleasant, and the microbial balance shifts in unpredictable ways. I recommend mixing only what you need for that day's application. If you have leftover, you can store it in the refrigerator for up to 3 days. After that, discard it and mix fresh. The fifth mistake, and this is a subtle one, is applying this mixture to plants that are already severely diseased or pest-ridden. This is not a pesticide, and it is not a fungicide, though the calcium boost does help the plant resist powdery mildew over time. If your plants are already covered in downy mildew or infested with cucumber beetles, you need to address those problems first. This mixture is a feeding strategy, a way to keep healthy plants productive for longer. It will not resurrect a plant that is already dying from disease. Start early before problems appear, and you will see the best results. Now let me explain the science in a little more depth, because I think understanding why this works makes you a better gardener overall, not just with cucumbers. The key concept here is something called the senescence signal. Every annual plant has a built-in clock that tells it when to stop growing and start dying. That clock is not just based on day length or temperature, though those play a role. It is heavily influenced by nutrient availability, specifically the ratio of potassium to nitrogen in the plant's tissues. When potassium levels drop below a certain threshold, the plant interprets this as a signal that the soil is exhausted and the season is ending. It shifts resources away from new growth and fruit production and towards seed maturation. It is trying to reproduce before it dies. This is why you often see a cucumber plant put out one last desperate flush of fruit that matures too quickly and tastes bitter. The plant is rushing to finish its seeds. By providing a steady, bioavailable supply of potassium exactly when the plant needs it most, during the fruiting phase, you are essentially silencing that senescence signal. You are telling the plant that the soil is still rich, the season is still young, and there is no need to panic. The plant keeps producing new flowers, keeps setting fruit, keeps photosynthesizing at full capacity, because its internal nutrient sensors are reading abundance, not scarcity. The calcium from the milk plays a supporting role in this. Calcium is not mobile within the plant. Once it is deposited in a leaf or a stem, it stays there. This means the plant needs a constant supply of calcium to build new tissue. If calcium runs low, the growing tips die back and the plant's architecture collapses. The milk provides that constant supply, and because it is delivered in a biologically active form, the uptake is smooth and continuous. The microbial feeding effect of the milk fat is the third leg of the stool. Healthy soil is not just dirt. It is a living ecosystem containing billions of bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematodes per teaspoon. These organisms form a food web that processes organic matter and makes nutrients available to plants. When you feed that food web, you get better nutrient cycling, better soil structure, better water retention, and better disease suppression. The milk fat is not directly feeding the plant. It is feeding the soil life that feeds the plant. This is a concept that modern agriculture lost somewhere along the way, and we are only now rediscovering how important it is. I want to share my results from that first season using this method, because I think they set realistic expectations. I had 6 cucumber plants, a mix of Marketmore and straight 8 varieties. They were planted in ordinary garden soil amended with compost, nothing special. By late July, before I started the milk and ash treatment, the plants were in decline. Leaves yellowing, fruit production slowing, the usual story. I applied the first dose on July 28th. Within a week, the yellowing stopped spreading. Within 2 weeks, new flowers appeared. Within 3 weeks, I was picking again. By mid-September, those 6 plants were producing a combined total of about 8 to 10 cucumbers per week. Not record-breaking numbers, but respectable, and far more than I had ever harvested that late in the season. I picked my last cucumber on October 22nd, 2 days before a hard frost. That is nearly 3 extra months of production that I would have missed entirely if I had done nothing. The following year, I started the treatment earlier, at the first sign of flowers in early June. That year, my plants never declined. They stayed dark green and productive from June through October, without a single yellow leaf. I had so many cucumbers I was giving them away to neighbors, pickling them in batches, slicing them into every meal. It was almost too much. Almost. Now, you might be wondering if this works on other plants. The short answer is yes, with some modifications. Any heavy fruiting crop that demands a lot of potassium will benefit from this approach. Tomatoes respond very well, though I use a slightly weaker mixture for them because they are more sensitive to calcium fluctuations. Peppers love it. Eggplants love it. Squash and melons are in the same family as cucumbers, and they respond almost identically. For leafy greens like lettuce or spinach, this mixture is not ideal because those plants want more nitrogen and less potassium. For root crops like carrots and beets, the potassium can actually cause forking and hairy roots if overapplied, so I avoid it there. But for fruiting vegetables, this is a game changer. You might also be wondering about the safety of using milk in the garden. Does it attract pests? Does it smell? In my experience, no and no. The milk soaks into the soil quickly, especially if you water it in. I have never had an issue with raccoons, rodents, or insects being attracted to the application site. The smell is faint and dissipates within a few hours. If you are concerned, apply it in the evening and water it in well. By morning, you will not notice anything. What about raw milk versus pasteurized? I mentioned this briefly, but let me expand. Raw milk contains live bacteria, enzymes, and a fuller complement of vitamins that pasteurization degrades. If you have access to raw milk from a clean, reputable source, it is superior for this application. However, I want to be very clear. Do not use milk that you would not drink yourself. If the raw milk is from a questionable source, the risk of introducing pathogens like E. coli or salmonella into your garden soil, where they can persist and potentially contaminate your harvest, is not worth the benefit. Pasteurized whole milk from the store is safe and effective. Use that if you have any doubts. One more thing about the wood ash. If you collect it yourself, store it in a dry, sealed container. Ash is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture from the air. Wet ash loses its potency because the potassium leaches out and the fine particles clump together. Keep it dry, and it will remain effective indefinitely. Let me walk you through the full season schedule so you have a clear plan. In early spring before planting, do a soil test if you can. You want to know your baseline pH and nutrient levels. Cucumbers prefer a pH between 6.0 and 6.8. If your soil is already very alkaline, above 7.5, the wood ash in this mixture might push it too high. In that case, reduce the ash to half a tablespoon per liter of milk, or consider using a different potassium source like potassium sulfate, though that defeats the low-cost appeal of this method. Most garden soils are slightly acidic to neutral, and the milk moderates the ash enough that pH shift is minimal. But it is worth checking. Plant your cucumbers as you normally would in warm soil, with plenty of compost. Water consistently. Cucumbers are about 95% water, and they need steady moisture to produce quality fruit. Mulch around the plants to retain soil moisture and keep the roots cool. When the first flowers appear, mix your first bottle. Apply 1 cup per plant as a soil drench after watering. Mark the date on a calendar. 30 days later, apply the second dose. 30 days after that, the third. Continue until the end of your season. If you live in a climate with a very long growing season, you might apply 5 or even 6 doses. That is fine. The once-a-month rule holds. Between applications, do not add any other fertilizers unless a soil test indicates a specific deficiency. Overfeeding is just as harmful as underfeeding. The beauty of this method is its simplicity. You are giving the plant exactly what it needs, exactly when it needs it, and then you are getting out of the way. I want to close with a thought that has stayed with me since I started using this method. We live in an age of incredible technological sophistication. We have fertilizers engineered at the molecular level, hydroponic systems controlled by microchips, genetic modifications that promise to solve every agricultural challenge. And yet, a plastic bottle filled with milk and wood ash, a recipe that a peasant farmer in the 19th century would have recognized, outperforms most of them for the simple task of keeping a cucumber plant productive. It makes me wonder what other knowledge we have discarded, what other simple, elegant solutions have been buried under decades of marketing and convenience. Mrs. Kowalska passed away 2 years ago, a few months after she handed me that bottle. I never got to thank her properly. I never got to tell her that her secret, which she probably learned from her own grandmother, had completely transformed the way I garden. But I think about her every time I walk out to the cucumber trellis in September and find it still green, still flowering, still giving. And I hope that by sharing this with you, I am doing what she would have wanted. Passing it on. Keeping it alive. So here is what I want you to do. Try this. Just once. 1 bottle. 1 month. See what happens. And if it works for you the way it worked for me, tell someone else. Share the knowledge. Do not let it get lost again. And if you found this useful, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Tell me about your cucumbers. Tell me about your garden. Tell me about the old wisdom someone handed you that turned out to be true. I read every comment, and I am always learning from you as much as you learn from me. Thank you for watching. Now go feed your plants.